Morning, welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of everybody's time today. It's 10:32. So like I said, my name is Ashley Cadwell and I work for SDCOE, and welcome to our 23-24 Municipal Group Annual Training. Today we are going to have Annika Dorman with DMAX. She is a certified professional in stormwater quality and an industrial general permit trainer of record and qualified industrial stormwater practitioner. She is a senior scientist with a background in municipal and industrial stormwater program implementation and has over 14 years of stormwater management experience for numerous municipal clients, from program development, updates, and implementation to reporting and program planning. She has been working with SDCOE compliance group since 2013. So thank you so much for being with us, Annika.
Thank you, Ashley. And thank you to all of you for joining us this morning. We have a full schedule, so we're going to go through a little bit quickly. I just want to let you know, if you are just coming off of the industrial training session, that we're going to have a little bit of a repeat for the first few slides with the stormwater introduction. So real quick intro to our agenda. We're going to do a little bit of background of what is stormwater, and why do we care, and then get into some phase 2 MS4 permit reissuance notations. There's finally been some activity there, so we'll have some things to report. And then we'll get into your stormwater management plan implementation, the different aspects of that. And then today we also have some representatives from DUDEC, which we'll introduce them before their component. So we'll go through some engineering services spotlight for that, and a construction general permit. After the intermission, we'll have a brief potty break, and then we'll get into some current events before we wrap up for the day. So to start, we'll go through, for those of you new to stormwater or new to your position, we'll give a brief introduction of the background for stormwater management. So the whole basis is that runoff to the storm drain system does not receive treatment prior to discharge. That's different from your sewer system, which is all your interior, generally your interior drains, your toilets and sinks and showers, which all goes to a treatment plant before discharge offshore. And because of that, only clean rainwater is permitted to enter the storm drain system, with few exceptions, because anything that it touches on its way downstream, any pollutants that can be transported will be carried downstream without treatment. And so those pollutants are directly entering your water bodies, streams, bay, ocean, and affecting the quality of water there. The whole reason that we have regulations, which includes municipal permits, IGP, CGP, is to protect the beneficial uses of those waters of the United States. So to continue using the waters in the ways that we want to, pollutants need to remain below a specified level. So an example of that is if you want to use a water body for recreation or as a drinking water source, you want those bacteria levels to remain very low, so that they aren't going to make people sick. Or if you want to use a waterway for aquatic species habitat, then dirt and heavy metals need to stay low enough that you don't bury their habitat in dirt, and you don't create a toxic environment with those heavy metals. So the types of beneficial uses that we're discussing, generally, these are kind of some categories for those. There's a lot more than these, but they include things like contact or non-contact recreation. That's pretty simple. You're boating, you're swimming. Also includes municipal, agricultural, and industrial supplies. So each of those needs has different parameters. You can't irrigate a field with water that is too salty, for example. Habitat uses include marine, estuarine, endangered species, and wildlife habitat. So we all live in a pretty close to the coast comparatively. So it's easy to make those connections there. Water bodies are also used for migration by things like birds, spawning, you're looking at your fish and invertebrates, etc. Navigation, so if you're actually shipping goods or people upstream, then certain needs there. Also hydropower, which we do have some of, commercial and sport fishing, and then aquaculture and shellfish. Those are pretty easy to wrap your head around as well, because you don't want to have toxic seafood, which we are then ingesting. So the types of pollutants that have negative effects on those beneficial uses and therefore must be minimized include bacteria, which can come from things like food waste, decomposing organic waste, or fecal material. That's going to be your sewer contamination, your septic systems, doggy doos. Organic wastes, leaves and grass, they decompose and remove oxygen from those habitats, and that can create some dead zones. Trash is also unsightly, as well as carrying with it a lot of bacteria and other types of pollutants, and causing clogging and flooding and other issues like that. Dirt, sediments, obviously burying those habitats. Heavy metals create toxic environments and are toxic for people to ingest. Oils as well, you get that rainbow sheen from a small amount. It takes very little oil to contaminate a large volume of water. So oils are important to keep out of those water bodies. And soaps as well can coat your fish gills, cause suffocation and fish kills from that. So how do we manage those different pollutants is with permits. So in California, we have several different permits. So the types of pollutants associated with general operations, municipal activities, includes residential, commercial, municipal operations. Those are regulated by the municipal general permits, and those are region specific. So we do have 9 different regions in California that have their independent water boards that are tasked with enforcing those permits at a regional level. And that's intended to reflect the differences in the different zones of California. We have obviously a vast difference between Northern California and Southern California, or coastal versus inland. Pollutants associated with construction activities also applies to you guys. And those are regulated by the construction general permit, which is statewide, and that's largely targeted at reduction of sediments and dirt. And then pollutants associated with industrial activities. Hopefully you were at our the prior meeting to this, if you were involved in the industrial general permit, but that is your bus yards with transportation with maintenance, fueling, or washing. Okay. So how to control those through those permits is those permits generally include things like best management practices, which goes through how to keep your site clean. And that's the basis of all of the BMPs. So we'll go through a little bit in more detail, but you've got your good housekeeping and preventative maintenance, spill and leak prevention and response, material handling and waste management, erosion and sediment control, employee training. Hello, that's where you are now. And quality assurance and record keeping. And then the way that we check that that's actually being performed is with inspections, periodic inspections, and monitoring. And so to this point in the municipal side, we've not been doing the monitoring portion, at least not with lab sampling, but we do have you doing your inspections and monitoring of those discharge points to make sure that there's no erroneous discharges. Okay. So now I'm going to get into the exciting bits. So we do have some updates on permit reissuance. So I know this has been a can kicked down the road for a very, very long time. And every year I say, oh, nothing to report. They're pushing the timeline back. And we may still have some of that popping up, but we do actually have some motion. So I know many of you are probably aware, I sent out some emails back in May, June. And and those that was because we did get a informal sort of preliminary look at some draft language. And so we did prepare some comments. It was a very quick turnaround, but I did want to share a few points there with you. So if you are on this list, then you are currently listed in that very preliminary draft of the permit. So this is based on enrollment criteria, which I think they used 2019, which each of these have 10,000 or more students. So this is where your program would be going from optional at this point to mandatory program. But we're still, obviously, this is very preliminary, working out a lot of details. So we are expecting in the very near future a look at the actual public release of the informal draft. So the reason that they sent out the preliminary draft was essentially to have some input on it before it reaches the public process, because once they put something in writing and it starts to go through the public process, it's a lot harder to get substantive changes made at that point. So I think that was the reason they made some of the language available. So once that does come up, they've only given us 30 days. Our subcommittee on that is intending to immediately file for an extension and ask for more time, because 30 days is a very short amount of time to read such a lengthy and transformative document and make some real changes and some valid, make some valid alternative language recommendations. So we'll see what happens with that. And then after that, after the written comments would be provided, then we'd be looking at a preliminary draft, which is not yet out. And at that point, usually the boards tend to do some workshops and do a little bit more outreach at that point. And then it goes out for public comment on the working draft. So they're looking to make some motion on this. We're still obviously have a long way to go. So my comments were available to you guys on a spreadsheet that I provided the link to at the end of the school year last year. I can't remember now if that was May or June. I think it was June. Right up close to the end of the reporting year. So a very busy time, but yes, we collaborated with other people that were interested, and were providing comments via Casca. And the general kind of consensus is that their approach hadn't really made much progress crafting the language to suit the school districts specifically. So not a lot. There was a lot of language in there that didn't really apply, such as like ordinance and enforcement and reviewing private projects and things like that don't really apply to school district situations. So we made a lot of comments that were kind of an overhaul or global comment to that effect. Also made some more specific comments based on the concerns of funding, where that money is going to come from. And then also clarifying some language, challenging what the legal authority would be. Obviously, schools are not levying fines against themselves, and some of the language just doesn't quite make sense the way that they have it. There was also brought up some conflicting requirements with the state architect, so there's some fine tuning to be done there. At present, the way it's worded, it sounds like they want to intrude into the classroom a bit, and that's been a very staunch sticking point for everybody in the past in negotiations, trying to just reinforce that this permit should not be trying to change curricula, which goes through an extensive process separately. So trying to clarify that, since the informal response before has been, oh, no, we're not trying to get into the classrooms. We just want your boots on the ground, your staff trained, etc. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. And then I made note of a few overly prescriptive requirements that would have a cost to the districts without a perceptible improvement. So things like requiring a re-engage sensor. Well, if you're out in the desert and you don't have very much irrigation, and we just turn it on when you need to, it seems overly prescriptive to require re-engage sensor systems, etc. So I did also provide a link to an analysis that I did of that draft language against your existing stormwater management plans, which is still available. I didn't put the link in here just because this is a working document, and this is a presentation that should be posted to the county office website. But if you are interested in weighing in or taking a look at those that analysis directly, you can either find that email or just send me a new email, and I will send you that link so you can take a look at that. But for the most part, it's not so different from our current approach, because we've been running a program that we tailored after the old, small MS4 non-traditionals requirements. Most of the components are similar to your existing SWIMP. They just have been formalized, detailed, and reporting is going to be a bigger, more onerous task. Some specifics are in there that may be difficult to implement, which I'll need some feedback from you guys on once we have another draft to look at. Things like 24-hour spill response, is there capacity? Is that already existing? Just thought like some feedback from you guys on that. The degree that each of you has inventory of your different facilities and assets, your structural BMPs, all of those things. What do those inventories look like? Is it just a quick list? I know this is going to be dependent on your size, but since the districts that they are looking to designate are the larger districts, in theory, you might have quite a few of these different devices and may need to formalize some of those inventories. We'll see what that looks like. It also includes some regional collaboration opportunities in theory. The language that we saw was not super specific of what that meant. Like, what does contribute to mean? Is that just a monetary contribution to an existing program that's run by your local municipalities? Or, what level of engagement are they looking at? So there's some not very well outlined things there, but that could turn into some good opportunities for some collaboration, really getting some effective change to happen. So next steps coming up, just that the informal draft is expected very soon. So you can expect some emails from me and a request for feedback on some of these points. Again, that's a very short 30-day timeline to turn around comments. So expediency is appreciated for that. And if you do have any specifics, things that you're interested in, and you want to be part of more of a task force to have some conversations and develop those comments with me, I'd be happy to have your input. So go ahead and email me if that's the case. Okay. So we're going to move now into your current stormwater management plan implementation. So obviously, until we have a permit to look at, we're going to continue to implement our adopted stormwater management plans and continue to do so effectively and try to make those small modifications here and there, just where it starts to make sense for future. So if you can make those changes gradually, that will make your life easier if and when we do have designation to handle. Okay. So you are here at the training portion. So annually, that's what most of your SWIMPs indicate. You want to have your training for custodial, maintenance, facilities, and operations staff. So if they are not here, if this is the higher level presentation and you don't want to or can't afford to spend all that staff time listening to this entire presentation, you will be able to take the PDF of the presentation or just fast forward the video recording and make sure that they get the training that they need. It's also good to train them individually using your monthly messages, just so that you have that consistency and a place to record those training sign-ins. As applicable, feedback should be collected on what you are doing with student education. While we have shifted focus away from that, obviously with the boots on the ground approach, if you still have a good feedback loop with your education side, it's not changing that education. It's just letting you know, yes, we cover the water cycle in 4th grade, and they have field trips, they do their clubs and cleanup events and things like that. So if you do have that good feedback loop, please continue that, and we collect that information for your annual report every year. Okay. Our next component is routine good housekeeping. So this is just your basic keeping your sites clean. Obviously, municipal operations yards and storage areas tend to collect some debris. So anytime, whatever's good for you, if that's a good activity to do over the winter break, or over, you guys have a lot of keep very busy over the summer getting those projects done, but whatever time of year is good for spring cleaning or a fall sweep, whatever it is, it's good to go through those areas where those items tend to accumulate and try to clean house to make sure we keep those areas as clean as possible. Parking lots, of course, accumulate oil and trash and debris. Dumpster areas, we see this a lot where they haven't been pulled out in a while, and so they've got quite an accumulation of debris, staining, miscellaneous debris underneath those. So make sure you do regularly pull those out and clean them up. It is a good time to do all of these things right before the rainy season. The more cleaning that you do upstream, the less flooding and clogging you're going to have downstream, as well as preventing those pollutants from being transported. So always a good time to do that. Lunch areas, I've seen more and more these areas getting plumbed to sewer, getting covers over them, and just kind of removing them as an exterior stormwater pollution source. So that's been really great to see. Great job. General campus, anywhere that these students are congregating, particularly the older grades, tend to have all of those food packaging scraps that tend to accumulate in those far distant corners. So running your perimeter, making sure that those, especially at entrances and exits and places where the students are congregating, are regularly cleaned up. Then we have our hotspots, which are super fun. So ag programs, community gardens, pools, auto shops. We've seen a lot of problems at arts as well. So we've got ceramics or outdoor art happening. Anytime you've got materials like that, clay and paint and whatnot, you're going to have need for cleaning. So making sure that you are facilitating those activities by providing an appropriate cleaning spot, washout location. So if that's a mop sink, if that's a sewer drain, or letting things dry out in a contained area and then disposing of them as solid waste, however that needs to happen. Okay, as you are cleaning up these areas, just remember that dry methods are best wherever possible. So vacuum assisted sweeping is fantastic when you can do it. Especially in areas that have a lot of vehicle traffic, you're going to get a lot of fine heavy metal particulate, and that's best removed from those cracks and crevices with a vacuum assisted sweeper. If you can't have that, or you're getting those the areas that it can't reach, you can of course do some manual sweeping. I wanted to reiterate that leaf blowers have some limited benefit as far as this goes. If they tend to have a nice big plume of dust and redistribute that small particulate around your site rather than removing it. They also tend to get just kind of blown into your landscaping or into unpaved areas without being recollected potentially. And that can be problematic depending on that situation where it can be transported later on with your heavier rains. So poo-pooing the leaf blowers a bit in favor of some more effective methods. If you do need to do some wet cleaning, particularly I see this with the lunch areas where you've got your milk and juice spills occasionally, identify if you do have any inlets within your lunch area that drain to storm. And if so, then you'd want to provide those covers, those mats for those inlets and sandbags to be able to protect those drains during that activity. If that's like a once or twice a year activity, then that seems feasible. It can also go into your landscaping if that's the way you can get it to flow. As long as it doesn't have anything hazardous, it's okay to go into your landscaping without causing any erosion. I did get a call about this recently, so if you're on the line, you can tell us how it went. But yes, hydrojetting of the storm drained, you still would need to recollect that water. So that's not clean rainwater. That is a wash wash water at that point. So you would want to identify a downstream point where you can block off flow and then have a plan for how to remove that material. So if that's a shop vac, factor truck, anything like that, however you need to make that happen, make sure that you've got a plan before you start that activity. And that goes for all types of outdoor washing as well. So any pressure washing, downspout cleaning. I know those activities tend to use some water there. Okay, and then we're getting into our good housekeeping. So you do want to minimize your spills and leaks. So conducting those activities and projects. I know art often gets pushed outside. Other types of activities, just make sure that those are indoors whenever possible. And if not possible, try to contain or protect that outdoor area where it's occurring to minimize those spills from getting into the storm drain system. Make sure you have your spill kits stocked. So clay absorbent, mats, mops, even paper towels, anything that's going to be absorbing those spills is great. If you don't have a large volume, those are sufficient. If you've got larger volumes or you've got hazardous materials such as like an auto shop, or a pool, chemicals, things like that, you may want to make sure that you have something a little bit more substantial. So if you've got some absorbent booms, some mats, pigs, etc. Okay. And then just make sure that you are training your spill and leak response personnel. So if this is your facilities crew, if this is your grounds maintenance, custodial staff, whomever may need to know, just make sure that they know what to do if they do have a bigger spill. So first, you're identifying and abating that flow. You're making sure to protect any nearby discharge points. Remove that spilled substance, however that needs to happen, if that's absorbent or vacuuming or sweeping. And then making sure that that process is repeated or reapplied as needed until all that residue is removed. So particularly with things like oils that are going to really soak into your porous asphalt and concrete, you may need more than one application or a different type of removal process to get all of that residue up. And then, of course, properly disposing of your spent spill kit materials. If they are saturated with a hazardous material, they would need to be disposed of as hazardous. So if that's anything more than trace amounts generally. So if you've got an auto shop, you should have already, a contract with Safety Clean or another hazardous materials, a waste hauler for you, and make sure that that goes as appropriate. And then, of course, restocking that spill kit. So anything that you used in that process needs to be restocked for next time. This is all in support of an illicit discharge prevention. So this gets into some things we've already discussed with your good housekeeping, but making sure that those cleaning activities are facilitated. So if you've got need for something to be mopped regularly and you're going to have that waste stream, make sure that they have a mop sink accessible to that staff. I think most of your custodial staff at your school sites do have mop sinks. Do you have what you need at your municipal maintenance yard, for example? Where is that waste going? If you can make it easier for your staff, then you're more likely to get compliance and get that achieved in the right way. So, okay. Also, I know you're not the only people at your sites. So if you do have vendors coming on site, make sure that they are also employing appropriate BMPs. You all have contract language as part of your SWIMP. I think almost every one of you has the contract language implemented. They are also available on the county office website if you need some example language to include in those contracts, but making sure that they are aware that they need to be complying with your SWIMP. Auditing their activities is also a good idea, especially power washers or anyone else that's going to be generating a large waste stream. And when you're doing your regular checks of your inlets, your inspections, you can also look for evidence of past discharges. Sometimes we'll see stuff like kind of draping over the grates, and you can definitely see there was some nasty mop water, or you can see paint, you can see staining from other types of discharges. So if you do see any evidence that something has been occurring, try to determine the source. Sometimes you'll look up and see, a special activity at that particular school, and you'll need to talk to that teacher and see what's going on. And then it's also a good idea to do your leak audits. I think that was a monthly message just a month or two ago. But yeah, check your water meters, make sure you don't have any water loss when you don't have anything running. You should not have any irrigation water leaving your site, etc. Okay, and then we'll get into your material handling and waste management. We've already discussed dumpster enclosures, making sure that you are pulling those out and cleaning them thoroughly. If you do have any other materials or waste that can contribute pollutants, then you want to make sure that those get covered and or contained. So a lot of your sites will have, for example, some galvanized pipes or materials, some treated wood. If you've got an auto shop, you've probably got some automotive components. A lot of places have used tires. All of those things need to be covered and protected from contact with stormwater. And then a good rule of thumb is any liquids greater than a gallon, greater than or equal to a gallon, should have secondary containment, which can be your building. So if it's located indoors and not right next to an opening or doorway, that should be sufficient. The larger the container, the further away from the door you'd want it to be, just to prevent any accidental spills or discharges. And a good rule of thumb is that containment should be sufficient to contain about 110% of the largest container or 50% of the total volume, whichever of the two is greater. Okay. On your sites, it's important to kind of look at where the flow is going. So if you've got downspouts or you've got swales or any other concentrated flows, try to divert those away from any waste materials or work areas, or locate those activities elsewhere. You can do that. I've seen downspouts coming straight into the back of a dirty dumpster enclosure, and that's not ideal because you're going to get a lot more of those pollutants flushing out. So downspout extenders can be useful there to direct that flow out of the enclosure, or better yet, into your landscaping so that it can be used for irrigation. As long as you're not causing erosion, that's fine. And you generally want it to be a little bit away from the foundations. And sandbags can also work for that as well. So if you do want to divert flow away from something that does temporarily need to be there, I've seen this with stockpiles, where you've got a landscaping project, something like that. Both containing that stockpile as well as trying to divert the water away is a good idea. If you do have any outdoor containers or equipment, so this is your drums, dumpsters, trash cans, also your billy goats, your vacuums, your forklifts, any of those types of containers or equipment, make sure that you're observing them for any pollutant residue as well. So they tend to get covered in the bits of oil and get some, dirt caked on there. Mowers always have, the grass clippings, etc. So making sure that those stay clean. Okay. And then getting into grounds, routinely, obviously, you want to keep up your grounds, perform your annual audits, and conduct thorough maintenance. So you want to make sure any erosive slopes or unpaved areas are adequately stabilized, depending on what your use of that area would be. If you have an irrigation system, make sure it's free of overspray or leaks. You're not oversaturating your landscape. And then make sure that your weed and pest control practices are in line with your integrated pest management process and your policies for minimizing chemical use. So annually, you're going to want to also inspect your storm drain system. So that's your inlets, your gutters, your brow ditches. Make sure that that's usually done in conjunction with cleaning. You're not always going to hike up that hill and see what's clogging your brow ditch without an impetus. So it's good to just do that all at the same time. You want to identify and eliminate any discharges. So if you see anything active going into those drains, you should be conducting your inspections during dry weather, so when it's not raining. So if you do see any water either puddled or flowing, you would want to go upstream and see what the source of that may be. So often, you can really identify some irrigation issues with that, because you often irrigate early in the morning and then you'll see those little puddles in your catch basins. So it's a good way to kind of knock that all out at the same time. And then you also want to inspect your structural BMPs. So that's your vegetated swales, your basins, inlet filters, etc. For those, you definitely want to refer to your maintenance requirements that are listed in the development documents. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about development and planning. So a brief intro to structural BMP maintenance. So I do see this a lot where there's a bit of a disconnect between the planning department and the facilities department where you're actually going to be maintaining these items. So once construction is completed and everything has been installed, all of that information of how to maintain something, what it should look like, how it's supposed to operate, what its lifespan is expected to be, all that information should be in the planning documents. So we really want that information to be getting transferred over to the facilities people so that they can set up work orders to, you know, annually be looking at these devices and know what conditions are being met for maintenance. And then if they do need to have anything, what we see a lot is like plant die-off, for example, in these bioswales and these vegetated swales. And that's, you know, not an ideal situation. So these are an expensive investment in your future healthy stormwater. So you want to protect that investment and reduce your future maintenance costs. It costs a lot more to have to redo something than it would to maintain it to its full potential. So these are some universal checklists that you can use for your staff. There's also a monthly message that has this same table there. So just making sure that these conditions are met with those different devices. But again, the best place to look for that is with the actual planning documents, which will have the maintenance recommendations. Okay, and we'll get into construction after we take a little bit of an intermission in a few moments. But this is one additional inspection and maintenance component of your SWIMP. So for minor projects, these are the ones that you guys are completing internally, generally, or with some small contracts. So painting, drywall work, concrete work, landscaping, anything when you're disturbing the ground, you know, digging up some pipes, changing plumbing, sprinkler testing, etc. You definitely want to spot check those BMPs, make sure your staff are doing what they should be doing. For example, it's a lot easier to keep your asphalt clean when you're doing like digging up a sprinkler or a pipe or something like that. If you lay down a tarp and put all the dirt on that tarp, then you can just pick up the tarp and put all the dirt back when you're done. So little changes here and there. You know, if you're observing these activities as they're happening, you can make some additional recommendations to your staff of how to you know, reduce the effort and improve stormwater quality at the end. And then if you have major projects, so generally these are larger projects that are subject to the construction general permit, you still want to be spot checking your contractors as well. So we'll see that spotlight later on in this presentation. Preventative maintenance. So you have a lot of equipment and systems outside that can spill or leak pollutants. So this is not only your vehicles and getting their oil changes and getting maintenance as needed, but it's also equipment like your pool filtration systems, any hydraulic lifts, hydroponic systems. If you've got an ag program, there may be you know, additional equipment being used for all of those things. So you do want to make sure that they have an established maintenance procedure and schedule. So make sure that they are staying clean and operational. Okay, and then for record keeping, obviously you got your training logs. So if you were on earlier in the chat, I included the link to the training certificates. I'll put it on again and I'll do it again at the end of the presentation. But making sure you're keeping your training logs. If you're using your monthly messages, make sure you're turning those over and having everybody sign in. Obviously those documents can be signed, you know, digitally if you prefer, if that works better for your workflow. But yeah, making sure you're retaining them somewhere. We've also been trying to improve reportability of your efforts. So some of these things like work orders, some of you have had some success with, others are having more struggles getting those implemented, but having some way to report out at the end of the year the efforts that were made in the name of stormwater is important. And then in the future, we'll have a lot more specifics to be reporting on. So it's just good to get into the habit of logging these activities or setting those recurring work orders so that you can pull them out. And then inventories and maps. So for your structural BMPs and other drainage features, it's important to have those items on your site maps. If you don't already, I think most of you do. And then if you do have a way to inventory those or keep a list, that is also helpful to know. And I'll probably be reaching out to you about that. Additional record keeping, I prepare your stormwater management plan every year. This year we initiated that online reporting form. So the link is here. It's a little late for last year, a little early for this year, but in June I'll be sending you that link again. And I think it worked pretty well. I think it was about probably 60% of you completed your form online this year. So that was nice to see. So yeah, if it continues to be successful, we'll have that might eliminate the other type of questionnaire. Okay. So now we're getting into planning and development component of your SWIMP. And so that includes things we've discussed, like including your stormwater language in your contracts. It also gets into, consideration of some low impact development concepts and including those where feasible. So I know I say a lot when you've got an existing project that's going to be breaking ground or changing the layout of an area, take a moment to think about how that could be improved. So is there a way to direct runoff into the landscaping during that change? Is there, a possibility of reducing your paved areas? Things like that are all low impact development concepts. Also, when you have existing, some funding, maybe to do a specific project, is there a way to work in some cover or containment for some storage or from some activity areas that are currently outdoors exposed to stormwater? Can you get those indoors? Can you, modify your plans a little bit that it makes those things more feasible? And then getting into also hot spots, those areas, again, not just your storage areas, but your hotspot areas. Is there anything, you can add on or rearrange or repurpose to make those hotspots less of a hotspot? We want to really isolate those pollutants and keep those contained on site. And then, as I mentioned, coordination with the planning staff to ensure that seamless transition between post-construction between the construction and planning phase and into post-construction and maintenance ongoing. We really want to keep that line of communication open. So, I am now going to turn it over to our friends over at DUDEC. So we had some changes this year. We are under a new contract with SDCOE, so DMAX will continue to be your stormwater consultant for the next few years. And as part of that process, we also decided to include DUDEC, of which we have a couple of associates here online today that will be talking to you, as our sub-consultant for civil engineering and some additional, so we'll be helping out with some other tasks. But as far as what relates to you, more specifically, they can provide any as-needed design engineering, environmental permitting, or any related services through our existing contract with the County Office of Education. So I've invited them here today to give you a little bit more info of their background and expertise and how they can help you out. So Ashley, do you want to read their introductions?
Yes, thank you guys for joining us. Today we have Bryn Evans with DUDEC, and he is a certified professional in stormwater quality and a water quality specialist with 23 years of experience working in the stormwater and regulatory compliance environment. Bryn is a trained marine ecologist with extensive outreach and multiple discipline stakeholder planning experience, including various K-8 educational involvement efforts. We also have Shannon Brown with DUDEC, who is a professional engineer, qualified industrial stormwater practitioner, and qualified SWIP developer. He is a civil engineer and compliance specialist with 12 years of experience in municipal, industrial, and construction regulatory processes. Shannon has a background in environmental engineering and focuses on stormwater, water, and wastewater program planning, permitting, and infrastructure design.
Thank you, Ashley, for that introduction. I'll just take a second here and just talk about Dudek as a firm. We're a multidiscipline engineering and environmental consulting firm. We have a long history here in San Diego County. We were founded over 40 years ago and have offices now in Liberty Station and Encinitas, as well as throughout the state and the US. In the company, we've got a diversity of technical disciplines related to water resources, including water and wastewater planning, infrastructure, environmental permitting, biology, and of course, stormwater. I started here about 10 years ago and really helped focus our stormwater practice on municipal compliance aspects, including the pollutant management components that Annika was talking about, trash, permit compliance, monitoring, strategic planning, all related to municipal stormwater compliance and permitting. And one of the things I really enjoy about our team here is that we have direct access to technical experts in a variety of stormwater related disciplines. We're able to utilize that collective expertise to support municipal and special district clients like you all at the County Office of Education to address many water resource related challenges. The other thing I'll mention before I hand off to Shannon to talk a little more about our stormwater expertise is that we've developed a close working relationship with DMAX and the staff there over the past few years, working on a variety of projects with San Diego clients. And that collaboration has really helped move some of our clients' programs forward in cost-efficient and strategic ways. And so we're hoping to be able to contribute to the team here in any way that comes up and support DMAX in supporting you guys. So with that, I'll hand it over to Shannon and he can talk through some of the stormwater specific elements.
All right. Thanks, Bren. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so I don't want to repeat too much of what Bren and Annika have already talked about here, but just want to kind of highlight some of the expertise that Dudek might be able to offer depending on what type of projects come up. You know, of course, we have starting from the beginning, we have our regulatory planning, our permit support services, like Britton mentioned, everything from biological surveys through, you know, the permit acquisition and, you know, meeting with regulatory agencies. Specifically on the engineering design services side, we offer a suite of services from concept planning through final design. You know, our expertise are in water quality, best management practices, low impact development type of BMPs, whether or not they be for targeted pollutants, part of TMDL compliance, trash amendment specific items. Then we also specialize in water reuse as well. So, you know, figuring out solutions for using stormwater as a resource, whether or not that's, you know, groundwater recharge, or even as far as gray water type of projects. And then we also offer a lot of services and do a lot of design for erosion control, flood control projects, you know, really the whole suite. And obviously I'm focusing specifically on stormwater, but that's, you know, that's a big part of our practice. And it comes out of the organic growth that we've had from being an environmental consulting firm with a focus on providing sort of the nexus between you know, infrastructure and the environment. So and one final point I wanted to kind of quickly bring up here too is that, you know, we also have add-on services, or not add-on, but sort of end of life services, where we're talking about doing BMP maintenance plans as well as performance assessment. So understanding how those actual BMPs are performing through time is always critical for making sure that they're performing to the standards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon and Bryn. So yeah, I've included their contact information here in case you do have any more specific questions. If you have a project that you would like some advice on, and see if they can help you out with that. So yeah, they are accessible to you via our contract with the county office. Okay, so we're going to take a brief intermission. We've been at it for a while now, so we're going to do a 5-minute stretch break and, grab your water, use the restroom. And when we come back, we're going to talk construction. So I'll see you all back here at 11:25. All right, I hope everybody had a good stretch, and we are back for the last round. So we're going to get into some construction topics. So this is definitely a hot button issue, and I know there's a lot of projects ongoing at your sites, and there have been some updates to the construction permits. So We're going to spotlight that and go through those permit requirements, those changes to the permit, and some key BMPs. To do that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Teresa. Ashley, are you there? Did you want to read her introduction?
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, Teresa. Teresa Linden with DMAX is a certified professional in stormwater quality, qualified industrial stormwater practitioner, and qualified SWIP developer. She coordinates fieldwork for construction stormwater quality inspections for the cities of Lemon Grove, National City, Santee, and Carlsbad. Additionally, she works with inspection staff to complete post-construction BMP inspections to ensure adequate construction and design under the developmental and redevelopment requirements. Hello, Teresa.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello. All right, so just diving right into the permit requirements, we're talking about preserving water quality, and the main pollutant of concern, of course, is sediment. So we have some not so fun pictures here showing some sediment entering the curb gutter and into some storm drains. And that's a problem because, of course, not only does it make our beaches unpleasant to swim in, but it does affect, aquatic life that lives in the creeks and our beaches as well. By smothering them and also transporting other pollutants. So that's the main goal of us implementing construction BMPs. Next slide. All right, and then there's two different permits that regulate construction activity. So like Annika mentioned, there's changes to the construction general permit that went effective as of September 1st of this month. And that is meaning that the construction general permit is now under the 2022 version. So there's some changes compared to what you guys have been implementing in the past. And that's only applicable to sites that are over or equal to an acre or included in a larger common plan of development. And that includes both the disturbed area and the storage yards you may have, and it affects what on-site activities are happening. But all sites, of course, no matter how small they are, do need to implement construction BMPs as well. It's just that there's this additional layer for the construction general permit that needs to be done for those larger sites. And the one thing that they did now add into the new CGP is some post-construction BMP requirements as well. So this little table just talks about the total disturbed area being the main factor that depends on which one you're subject to, or both if you're the CGP. All right, and then this is pretty much the same table saying that, when you have a small site under an acre, you're going to need that BMP plan, your erosion and sediment control plan. But also for sites larger than or equal to an acre, you need the SWIP developed. So the stormwater pollution prevention plan, that needs to be prepared by a QSD. It can't be prepared by your QSP. And then also you need to have site visits by your QSD and your QSP, which happen at different times of the year, in addition to weekly inspections by your QSP for a site that's over an acre. So there's just a lot more going on with a site that's over an acre that's required by the state. That's not a local requirement, but it's much easier to just implement regular BMPs for a smaller site. And of course, you're going to be inspected all year round, even if it's not raining. That's part of the construction process. All right, so this is kind of the more detailed version of what it is that is affects. So if you have that new application, any new projects that are over an acre, they're going to be subject to the new requirements. But if you have a project that's ongoing, it has a WDID number that's been issued under the 2009 permit, that's going to be grandfathered in until September 1st, 2025, which means if your project is completed by then, you don't need to worry about implementing the new changes, having a little bit more inspection cost and changes in the sampling plan. But if it does change or get extended beyond that date, you would have to re-enroll under the new 2022 construction general permit, and then be subject to you have to revise the SWIP and do additional inspections. So it'd be a little bit of a process. So hopefully anything that's ongoing now will be completed before that time, but you have a bit of time to get caught up in most cases. There's also some additional requirements that the state is now tracking who your qualified SWIP developer is, and that you need to be tracking that in SMARTS. And that needs to be, you can have multiple QSDs in SMARTS, which is great. There's like a primary and additional, but anytime the primary changes, you'll have to submit that in 30 days. And so That's just a new requirement to be aware of, especially if you have to link people to your account. And then also you have certain inspections that have to be done by the QSP or the QSD rather than a designee. So again, the cost can go up a little bit depending on having trained professionals completing those inspections. Next slide. All right, so then the key BMPs for any construction site, of course, are scheduling, just trying to minimize how much exposed sediment there is at any given time, doing it in phases wherever possible, directing water away from disturbed areas or from material stockpiles. And then, of course, erosion control is our #1 BMP. Our favorite BMP is to prevent erosion from occurring in the first place, so we don't have to clean it up. And then, of course, sediment control techniques are needed as well that will capture any soil that has been eroded undetached, and then inspecting those BMPs to make sure they're functional both before the storms and after, because sometimes they fill up and you need to just maintain them. So I have some more pictures coming down the road. But of course, erosion control is our #1 BMP here. And here's just some examples of different ones that can be used. Soil binders, hydro seed, mulch, blankets like the straw blanket in the lower corner are good for steep areas that aren't going to be disturbed for a long time. Certain BMPs are, like visqueen, you can always throw that on a slope or a stockpile, but it is going to increase the velocity of water. It's going to cause a little bit of erosion. So these BMPs are better overall. And usually when it's been 2 weeks, even if work has been planned, if nothing has happened, those erosion control BMPs temporarily need to be applied. So that can be a big thing for cost, because you want to keep your project going as fast as you can, as long as you can, so that you don't need to be applying, costly BMPs at all time. And then, of course, that little note at the bottom, sediment control BMPs do not meet this requirement. So you cannot just rely on the perimeter and say, well, everything is going to flow to my perimeter control BMPs. We really do need those erosion control BMPs to be applied within the site interior before rain events. And then, of course, when the site is inactive for long periods of time. Next slide. So then, of course, our sediment control BMPs are very important as well. The on-site BMPs like basins and sediment traps, which do need to be designed and sized accordingly to the CASCO fact sheets. But most common ones you'll see are street sweeping and vacuuming. For very large site, there might be an active treatment system, which is, probably not as much of an issue for you guys specifically, but that is required and is pretty costly as well. But next slide has the more common BMP for sediment control that you guys are going to see or implement everywhere is going to be those linear controls. So the silt fence in the top part, the black, will be retaining water. And then we have our fiber rolls, our straw wattles, gravel bag berms, compost rolls, and socks. And then inlet protection, I have a picture on the next slide here, where you might see check dams or just traditional inlet protection, where you can have water either pooling and kind of settling out pollutants, and then clean water can flow around it down to your storm drain in that picture on the left, or just fully blocking that. One thing that can confuse people is we ask people to remove inlet protection from the roadway before rain events so that you don't flood your roadway and cause any traffic hazards. So that can be a little bit confusing, and also means that after the rain event is over, putting those back in place, if it's within the site and it's not a traffic lane or something like that, it can be maintained during the rain event. But that can definitely be a cause of concern where you don't want to cause any safety concern around your construction area. And that sorry, Annika, if you could go back one more, that inlet screen is a really good low profile BMP that is good for corners. So if you are constantly battling with damaged gravel bags, something that's more tight against the curb can be really helpful to prevent constant need to replace those bags. All right, thank you. And then the stabilized construction entrance and exit is a super important BMP that a lot of times you'll see that people will just scatter some gravel on the top of it, and it'll just, by the weight of the vehicles, it'll dig it down and get embedded. Really, a construction entrance should be stabilized with either a combination of the shaker plate and the gravel, or that gravel can be typically 10 to 12 inches in depth for it to be installed properly. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but if they get it done properly the first time around, it'll last for the whole life of the project most of the time. Whereas if they don't do a good job, it'll just need constant maintenance, and it'll be tracking dirt into the roadway. So a really good entrance can prevent a lot of tracking and sweeping and labor. So that's a key BMP that we're always looking for. Next slide is vehicles. Of course, any on-site vehicles that are parked or even in the roadway should have drip pans underneath them when they're not in use. This can be a little bit of a problem because, you know, at the end of the day, they should have all their pans placed under them. But during the day, they might be used, you know, temporarily for certain times and then be used a little bit later in the fine. But I think that we just want to make sure that the vehicles are being maintained to prevent leaks in the first place, but they're also using those pans throughout the day. And then material and waste management is another big important one because there's always stockpiles and waste piles on construction sites, and those themselves can be sources of pollution that can cause, you know, leaks if the ground isn't protected, or when it does rain, they can transport a lot of pollutants out during the rain event. So that's why anytime you have a stockpile, like we're talking about like cold mix would be a really important one, even just soil, trash piles, and then would need to be covered and contained with either a gravel bag berm, a fiber roll, or a compost roll. And those concrete washouts do need to be covered when they're getting full or getting a new washout on site. And then also I highly recommend to people to place some plastic on the ground to prevent spills, especially if you're noticing anything around there as well. So that's another big one that can cause a lot of problem, a lot of cleanup if not done well in the beginning. And then common BMP issues, I kind of touched on these in all the previous slides, but here's some fun pictures that I took recently to show you guys. So here's a silt fence where, you know, it's done its job, it's been around for a while, but it's getting ripped and that just needs to be repaired or replaced if a repair can't take place. Gravel bags, you'll constantly see those getting run over, and spray painting those can, you know, around on them. Getting a traffic control diversion can help with that, but that's a common thing that can really add up in cost, is just maintain those different BMPs for inlet protection. And then, you know, as your slope protection degrades, you might see rills and erosion forming on your slope. It means you need to reapply your erosion control BMPs. And in this case, I don't know if you guys can really see, but the wattles are being filled with sediment. So, you know, they've gone through a few rain events, they've done their job, but in order to be as equally effective for future rain events, they need to be reinstalled so that they're good to go for the next rain event. So it mostly comes down to, you know, the BMPs just get wear down, they get degraded, they need to be repaired or reinstalled so they're fully functional again. And then I have some more just quick pictures for you guys again. So fiber rolls are not erosion controls on their own. They need to be used in combination with either soil binders, wood mulch, or hydroseed. In this case, you know, they have plants here. If you can see in the photo, like little plants, which is great. So those should grow into, but just seeing, you know, fiber rolls across your slope is not going to prevent erosion from happening completely. It will slow down your flow on that slope, but it won't prevent the soil from detaching. So that's not a good thing overall. And then improperly installed fiber rolls. So these wattles are just kind of thrown around the site, which, you know, most of the time that is not a good thing because those can float up when there is rain. So we want to get those staked and entrenched per the diagram in those Casco fact sheets. And the one on the right shows that it's nice and staked down. It's not going to go anywhere when it rains. It's going to keep all that sediment and trash in the site. Next one shows the wrong type of BMP being installed. So this one's really important because if you have a surface, in this case, it looks like dirt, but it's so hard and compacted, or there's rock underneath it where you can't stake in that fiber roll, you need to use a different BMP that is appropriate for that. So in this case, this dirt area is more of a impervious area where you would need to use either gravel bags or compost rolls. If you can't stake it down, a silt fence or a wattle is not going to be effective during a rain event. So those are the BMPs, just need to be swapped out with one that will work for that surface. And then in properly installed tracking controls, a lot of the times you'll see that, you know, they'll not put rock around either sides of the shaker plate, and a lot of drivers just like to drive around them. I'm sure people like have avoided speed bumps if you're in a parking lot before. It's kind of the same idea. So in this case, you know, people were driving around it, and then the bare dirt was getting eroded into the roadway. And then you can see the good picture is the same exact site after they fixed it up, and then they didn't have any more tracking issues. So just making sure that you either either button it up so people can't drive around it, or make the full width of where the vehicles may drive to be fully stabilized. And then this is the check dam installation. You might see they definitely have to be placed in the right orientation. So that kind of U shape is going to catch where the sediment and the water is going to pond, and then it's going to go flow around to the inlet. So in this case, on the left, the photo is showing that it's kind of facing downstream. So the water is not really going to do anything there. And it's also broken the damaged gravel bag. So a U shape is kind of a better approach to make sure that the flow is being captured, ponding out, settling out all that silt. And then the cleaner water is going to flow down to the MS4. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions on construction BMPs or the construction general permit?
All right, thank you, Teresa. And yeah, Teresa's with DMAX, and so she's also accessible to you. I know she's helped several of you out with some questions with smarts here and there, and I know she's developed some SWIPs for the county office as well, I believe. So if you do have any projects like that and you do have any other questions, or you could use our services, that's available to you as well. Okay, and just before we log off here, we're almost done, but I did want to give you a little current event update on the weather, just since it does look like we are going into an El Nino season, and it's looking likely to be a strong El Nino. So usually, not always, but usually that means more rain. So just to keep that in mind, preparation is key. Those higher intensity rain events can definitely result in erosion and flooding and scouring. So make sure you're shoring up those existing BMPs and protections, your erosion control and your sediment control BMPs. Make sure that you have appropriate storage so that your tarps can be secured. So if you've got a windy event, they're not going to go flying away. Making sure you're cleaning behind your storage units and doing all of those preparatory activities. I also added cleaning the interior of your secondary containments if they are outside or anywhere near an overhang. Those higher intensity storms can bring rain in at an angle. And if you've already got some pollutants inside of that containment, then that any overflow would be coming out. I see your hand up, Francisco. I'll just get to you in just a moment. And then also stocking up on those sandbags and cleaning out your storm drain structures to prevent flooding. Those are all good things to do before a very heavy rain event. So yeah, Francisco, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question regarding the conflicting, issues with DSA. I don't know if you can share a little bit more of that, or maybe you can send any documentation on that.
Sure. So that was actually something that was brought up by somebody in, I want to say Central California, but it was submitted as part of our collective CASCA comments on that informal draft of the permit. And I don't delve into that aspect of things, so I wasn't the one bringing up those concerns, so I can't speak too eloquently about it, but I can definitely forward on those comments to you, and I'll include a link to my analysis as well as those comments in a follow-up email.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. No problem. Glad you were listening. Anybody else have any questions? I'm going to send the link one more time for your training session certificates that is now in the chat. But as always, I'm always available to you guys with any questions. If it's something I don't know, generally somebody in our office or in our network will be able to answer your questions. We do have a full gamut of resources available to you. So, whatever it is, happy to field your questions and get you the answers that you need. So our information is here. Yeah, anything else, Ashley?
Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. It was great to see all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Have a great one, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.